But what none of them knew was that the woman they were laughing at would soon become one of the most loved and respected anchors in CNN's history. The same voice they mocked would one day move millions to tears. The same accent they ridiculed would become a symbol of courage, authenticity, and pride for an entire nation. In a world obsessed with sounding perfect, she dared to sound real. She didn't have the polished tone of a Hollywood newsreader or the accent of a native speaker. But she had something far greater: heart. And that heart would change everything. Her name was Maya Santos. Maya grew up in a small coastal town in the Philippines, the kind of place where mornings began with the scent of salt in the air and the cries of seagulls circling above the shore. Her mother sold fish at the local market, her hands always smelling of the sea, while her father drove a bright, rattling jeepney covered in hand-painted colors that faded under the tropical sun. They didn't have much, but they had dreams. Quiet dreams whispered over simple dinners and fading candlelight. Every night, Maya would sit beside that flickering candle, the shadows dancing on the thin bamboo walls of their home, holding a small transistor radio close to her ear. The signal crackled in and out, but she didn't mind. Somewhere between the static, she could hear English newscasters reporting stories from places she had never seen: London, New York, Hong Kong. She didn't understand every word, but she loved how they spoke: calm, commanding, confident, as if their voices carried the world's truth. In those moments, the little girl from a fishing village imagined herself behind a camera, speaking not to her small town, but to millions across oceans. That's when her dream began: to one day speak to the world. When she told her classmates she wanted to be a journalist, laughter filled the classroom. They couldn't see what she saw. "You? On TV? With that accent?" they mocked, their voices echoing like a dare. But Maya didn't let the laughter break her. She carried it, not as an insult, but as fuel. Each night, while other kids slept, she sat by that same candlelight, reading old newspapers aloud, mimicking the voices she heard on the radio. She stumbled, mispronounced, started over. And over time, her voice began to change, not because she wanted to sound different, but because she wanted to be understood. Her mother would often pause from cleaning fish, listening quietly from the doorway, her eyes soft with pride. Then she would say with a gentle smile, "Anak, your voice will travel far one day. Just keep speaking." And Maya did. Every night she kept speaking, not knowing that one day her voice really would travel farther than anyone could imagine. Years later, Maya graduated from a small local university, not a famous one, but a place where she had learned to turn every no into motivation. She walked across the stage in a borrowed gown, clutching her diploma as her parents cheered from the back row. For a brief moment, she believed the world was ready for her. With hope in her heart and determination in her hands, she sent out dozens of applications to media companies across Asia, from Manila to Singapore, from Kuala Lumpur to Hong Kong. Weeks turned into months. Emails went unanswered. Doors stayed closed. When rejections did arrive, they were cold and blunt. "We're looking for someone with a more international sound. Your look doesn't quite fit our network style. In other words, you're not what we're looking for." But Maya didn't give up. She took small freelance jobs, writing local stories, covering small-town events, reporting community news that barely made it beyond the province. Every interview, every report, every single word she spoke on camera became another step forward, another layer of experience. Then, one fateful afternoon, nature itself would write her destiny. A super typhoon, one of the strongest her region had ever seen, tore through her province without mercy. Winds howled, trees snapped, floods swallowed streets whole. Most reporters stayed indoors, terrified. But not Maya. Wearing a thin raincoat and holding a microphone wrapped in plastic, She stood knee-deep in rising water. Her hair whipped across her face, her voice trembling against the roar of the storm, but she never stopped reporting. She shouted over the wind, warning families to flee before the next wave hit. Her camera crew filmed her as she pushed forward, soaked, shivering, but unbroken. That report aired locally, and within hours, the clip went viral online. Viewers from across Asia watched in awe. Here was a woman standing in the middle of a natural disaster, not as a victim, but as a voice for her people. It was raw, emotional, and real. And thousands of miles away, in a quiet CNN Asia newsroom in Hong Kong, a producer watched that same clip. He replayed it 3 times, stunned by the courage, the authenticity, the heart. Then he sent an email that would change everything. Would you like to audition for our international desk? CNN, Asia. When Maya opened it, her hands trembled. She read it again and again, as if afraid it would disappear. That night she cried, not from fear, but from disbelief. For the first time, the world was calling her name. The girl who once listened to broken radio signals under candlelight was now being invited to speak on one of the most powerful networks on Earth. Her journey, the one that began with laughter and doubt, was about to step onto the world's biggest stage. When the plane touched down in Hong Kong, Maya pressed her face to the window, watching the city lights flicker like stars fall into Earth. She had never seen buildings so tall, streets so alive, people moving so quickly. In that moment, she felt both tiny and limitless. This was it. The world she had dreamed of since she was a child sitting by a candle. Her first day at CNN Asia was overwhelming. The newsroom buzzed with energy. Phones ringing, screens flashing, breaking headlines, producers rushing with headsets on. She stood quietly in the corner, clutching her notepad, heart pounding like a drum. Everyone spoke fast, precise, confident. Maya nodded, pretending to understand, even when the words felt heavy on her tongue. When her name was finally called for the screen test, her hands shook. She walked into the studio, lights blinding, cameras lined up like eyes waiting to judge. Her reflection glowed back from the teleprompter. She took a deep breath. The red light blinked. She began to speak. Her words stumbled, just slightly. Her accent slipped through. But her voice carried something the room had never heard before. Heart. She didn't just deliver headlines. She felt them. Her tone wavered with sincerity. Her eyes alive with purpose. When she finished, the studio fell silent for a beat too long. Then, one of the senior producers, a woman who had worked with dozens of anchors before, leaned forward and said quietly, "She's rough, but she's real." That was all it took. Maya was offered a role as a junior correspondent for CNN International. She couldn't believe it. Her dream had finally begun. But dreams, she was about to learn, don't always start with applause. Her first live broadcast aired 2 months later. It was a simple segment, an update on regional politics. But to her, it felt like standing on the edge of the world. She rehearsed every line, every pause, every breath. And when the cameras went live, she smiled nervously and began to speak. For 3 minutes, she held her composure, confident, steady, proud. But as soon as the broadcast ended, her phone began to buzz. At first, she thought they were messages of congratulations. They weren't. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Thousands of comments appeared within minutes. Some laughed at her accent. Others mocked her voice. One comment read, "She sounds like she's reading karaoke lyrics." Another said, "Why would CNN hire a Filipino with that pronunciation?" Each word cut deeper than the last. By midnight, hashtag CNN Filipina was trending, not as praise, but as ridicule. Maya sat alone in her small apartment, scrolling through the hate, tears falling onto her phone screen. For a moment, she thought about quitting, disappearing before the world could mock her again. Then, amid the noise, a new notification appeared. It was an email. Short, simple, and written in imperfect English. Maya, I saw you on CNN today. You made us proud. Don't ever change your accent. That's our voice on the world stage. She read it once, then again. Her tears turned to quiet laughter. Someone out there, maybe just one person, had heard her the way she meant to be heard. That night, she looked at her reflection in the window and whispered, "If the world won't accept my voice, I'll make them listen to it." And from that moment on, Maya Santos stopped trying to sound like everyone else. Instead, she decided to speak as herself, the girl from the Philippines who refused to be silenced. The morning after the storm of online ridicule, Maya walked back into the CNN newsroom with red eyes, but her head held high. Some colleagues avoided her, whispering softly behind computer screens. Others gave polite smiles that felt more like pity than support. But she didn't care. She'd already made a decision. If they were going to mock her for being herself, then she would double down on being herself. Instead of hiding her accent, she embraced it. Instead of forcing herself to sound American, she focused on sounding authentic. She poured her emotion, her compassion, her humanity into every story she told. And slowly, quietly, something began to change. Her first major turning point came during coverage of a devastating earthquake in Southeast Asia. While other anchors read scripts, Maya spoke from the heart. Her voice broke as she described mothers searching for their children, rescuers digging through debris with bare hands. She didn't just report the news, she felt it. And viewers around the world felt it too. Within hours, her segment began to spread across social media. People who once laughed at her accent were now moved by her sincerity. One comment stood out. "She may not sound like a typical CNN anchor, but she sounds like a real human being." That moment shifted everything. Producers noticed, viewers noticed, and soon, so did CNN's global audience. As months went by, Maya began to cover bigger stories, the kind that demanded empathy, not just eloquence. She reported from refugee camps, flood zones, war-torn villages, always standing where others were afraid to go. She spoke to people the world had forgotten and gave them a voice. Her accent, once mocked, became her signature, a symbol of resilience and global unity. Then, one night, after her coverage of a humanitarian crisis went viral for its raw emotion, CNN's official page posted a short clip of her report. The caption read, "This is Maya Santos. She doesn't just deliver news, she reminds the world what it means to care." That post exploded. Comments poured in from across the globe. "Her voice gives me hope. She sounds like my mother." Finally, someone who represents us on international news. Within weeks, Maya became one of the most watched and most loved anchors on CNN's global network. She wasn't the loudest or the most polished, but she was real. And that authenticity became her greatest power. When asked in an interview how she handled the early hate, she smiled and said, "They laughed at my voice. But now, the same voice speaks to millions." Years later, Maya Santos would stand once again in front of the same camera that once captured her tears. Only this time, she stood taller. Her voice, the same one they said wasn't good enough, now opened international broadcasts watched by millions. CNN promoted her to a senior anchor and international correspondent. Her documentaries on humanitarian stories earned global awards. But to Maya, the true reward was something else entirely: representation. Because every time she spoke, she carried the voices of people who had never been heard. The street vendors, the fishermen, the mothers raising children by candlelight. She was no longer just reading the news. She was the story. Proof that where you come from doesn't define how far your voice can travel. In one of her final interviews, a young journalism student asked her, "How did you keep going when everyone laughed?" Maya smiled softly. "Because I realized something," she said. "The world doesn't need perfect voices. It needs honest ones. Those words would echo across the internet, quoted by thousands, translated into dozens of languages, turned into sound bites and TikToks. Clips of her early struggles resurfaced, the same ones people once mocked. But now they carried a different caption: the woman who turned ridicule into respect. And as her story spread, millions of young dreamers, from Manila to Mumbai, from Lagos to Lima, began to believe that their voices mattered too. They didn't need to sound Western. They didn't need to hide their roots. They just needed to speak. Because Maya had already proven it. You don't have to change your voice to be heard by the world. You just have to believe it's worth listening to.